Are you new to the Elder Scrolls Online, or maybe a returning player wondering what exactly is the champion point system? How does it work? What are the most effective champion points currently in the game? How do you earn them quickly? And at what level of champion points should you start doing content? Great, you came to the right video. Welcome back, gang. It's Deltia from Deltiasgaming.com, and in this video, I'm going to give you everything you must know about the champion point system in 2022 and beyond. The CP system has undergone many changes and will receive another update in June with the release of High Isles. I'm going to include those proposed changes in this video and break down the system Deltia level, Barney level. But before we get started, please do me a big favor and smash that thumbs up button and consider checking out my builds at Deltiasgaming.com, as I have fully customizable builds for each playstyle and role, including champion point loadout. Buckle up, champion point system. This is what you need to know. The champion point system is an alternative form of progression and is a bit confusing for a new or returning player to understand. I'm going to give you some quick bullet points on how the system works and show you how you can use CP effectively with a deeper dive. Once you hit max level in the Elder Scrolls Online 50, you start earning champion points as an alternative form of progression. Champion points are account bound, so any character beyond level 50 earns champion points for your entire account and or other characters. Champion points are earned the exact same way as levels, through experience points. The system has both passive perks and active perks, or what I call slottables. These increase your character's performance and or convenience. The system has 3 constellations. The green tree is comprised of perks that provide increase in quality of life and mainly non-combat related benefits. The blue tree is the most important for role-dependent builds like tanks, healers, and damage dealers. The red fitness tree provides perks focusing on defense, PvP, resources, and unique perks like movement. Each constellation allows for only 4 slottables, so you'll need to make your decisions carefully. The CP system is now quote-unquote uncapped at 3,600, but has a soft cap on performance at or around 1,500 champion points. Beyond this, you won't see an increase in your performance, more or less just an increase in convenience. That's due to the limited number of passive perks, so beyond the 4 slottables per character, you won't see an advantage over other players because there is a limit to the amount of passives you gain, and this is what keeps the game on an even playing field. CP has both a catch-up mechanic and diminishing returns, so if you're a new player debating if it's worth playing the game, I reached 1,000 champion points on PCEU when I started over very easily with little effort compared to other MMOs I've played. The CP structure has path-based advancement that look like a spider web, requiring you to take points on the path in order to move in the direction towards perks. The system also has unconnected slottables which can be taken independently and do not require any path. Look, the system and user interface does look complex and intimidating when you first start. It did for me too when this was a huge revamp. However, most builds take the exact same 4 slottables or maybe 1 or 2 flex spots. Whether you're a tank, healer, or DPS, once you get familiar with the system, you're going to know exactly where to go, what to do. So don't let the intimidating user interface or what this complex system scare you off. Very easy to figure out. Let me continue to explain why. The 3 constellation system limits you to 4 slottables, like I said earlier, which is shown at the top of your bar in the UI. Consider the active perks the most impactful performance-based perks and what distinguishes your build from another player. You can highlight and see if they require them to be slotted or if they're passive just by putting your mouse over this. You can also save presets via the armory system, and you can actually use the armory system for a free champion point respec that doesn't cost any gold. In the user interface, you can just simply click a button and respec for some gold if you want to. So these are not permanent, these are not set and forget. Very active and easy to manipulate and change. This add-on on PC I have is called Dynamic CP, which shows the names of the champion points and can be very helpful when navigating the territory. Now let's move on and talk about active versus passive perks and how they affect your character. Active perks, like I said earlier, have the slottables. You can only take 4 of them. And one example is Arcane Supremacy, which increases your max magic perk stage. So you ramp that up per stage. Once you get to the max, it can't go any further, thus you can't gain any more max magic. That's when you drag, drop into this little bar, and bang, you receive your bonus. Something to note here is if you can't reach the next stage, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense of taking those champion points. Usually they move up in stages of 10 or 25. So if you're at 18 points and it costs 25, move off of it, don't consider taking it. Dump your points in something that's a relative passive versus something like this, where you're going to lose a bunch of points and not get any benefit. Now you also have what's called passive perks, which adds power to your character, but does not require a slot on your CP bar. And this here is the real advantage to having a lot of champion points, because everyone can only have the exact same amount of slottables, but the passives add power to your character without the need to slot them on your top bar. A good example of this is Eldritch Insight, granting max magic per stage from the blue warfare tree. You can get a decent boost to max magic on top of the active perk Arcane Supremacy. Regardless if you're magic, stamina, mage, healer, DPS, whatever, getting these passives boost up your character. So consider taking them all, especially at endgame when you're maxed out on CP. There's no downside. The actual appearance of the slottable is noticeable, and if you read the tooltip on each, the CP will tell you if it needs to be slotted for power or if it's passive. Now, if you scroll through the entire CP system, you'll start noticing a limited number of passives, and the majority of the system is slottable for specific roles like healing, tanking, damage, and so forth. Take the left portion of the blue warfare tree. This is mainly for healers. The bottom of the warfare tree, mainly for tanking. The upper, middle, and the right, mainly for damage healers. The reality is this: what seems like a complex system is very easy to understand once you realize almost all roles for both PvE and PvP take nearly the same CP slottables with little variation. So a bunch of slottables out there, but you can only have 4. So it's very easy to actually pick out what you need to optimize your build. Now, let's say you start earning some champion points, and you can equip them by stages. You need the minimum of stages to move along the constellation to get to the next passive or slottable. Some have 1 to 5 stages. These stages can range anywhere from 8 points to 120. Once you start navigating, you'll also notice a purple-ish color, and these are called quote-unquote sub-constellations. Think of them as a drop-down menu for CP. They ran out of room and they needed to put them somewhere. So you can dive down into these, drop down, you'll find even more slottables and a few passives. Another important tip here is what I call independent or unconnected slottables in your constellation. This is especially helpful for new players because you won't have to move along the CP tree in order to start using them, assuming you have the champion points. There are also CP slottables without stages, and each point increases your power. These are ideal for new players. An example would be Boundless Vitality from the red tree, increasing your max health per point spent. Is this starting to make sense now? The system seems huge, daunting, and there's tons of things to pick from. But in reality, once you get some experience, they're very simple and you're almost always going to pick the same thing. So the too long didn't read here is you start earning experience, you hit max level, then you start earning champion points. You start taking things you can get a hold of right away to increase your character's power and performance. Once you got a bunch of CP, then you start moving along a trajectory to the really impactful active perks that you want. Then you fill in the rest of the blanks with passives to increase your character's power and make you as much powerful as possible in the champion point system. Now I have all of these on my website and I update them frequently depending on how the game changes. So I'm going to go over a list of a few important slottables. Just realize this may change because they adjust CP all the time, but I'm going to tell you what I choose right now, why I think it's relevant, and how you can take them and augment your build. In the green tree, I'd recommend taking the independent slottable Steed's Blessing because it increases your out of combat movement speed. Now I work my way up to the Constellation up to the Treasure Hunter slottable, which increases the quality of items you find in treasure chests. This will dramatically increase your ability to find weapons and jewelry in chests and help fill out your sticker book collecting those painful items, specifically the weapons. Some performance-based slottables to consider here are Gifted Rider, increasing your mount speed, War Mount, increasing your mastery with mounts, removing all mount stamina cost outside of combat. Some gold-saving slottables to consider: Rationer, adds 10 minutes to the duration of any food or drink. Liquid Efficiency, whenever you use a potion or a poison, you have a percentage-based chance to not consume it. Plentiful Harvest, you have a percentage chance to gain double the yield from normal resource nodes per stage. Next up, we have the Blue Warfare Constellation, your go-to for damage, healing, and tanking. The most important passive to consider for new players in PvE specifically is called Preparation, which reduces your damage taken from non-player attacks by up to 10%. How you get this is you follow along the path, taking the minimum CP to move on the spider web in the drop-down sub-constellation Staving Death. You're going to max this out straight away and get a massive whopping 10% damage reduction in PvE. Solo, dungeons, doesn't matter. Then as a new player, you can also select the unconnected active perks like Untamed Aggression straight away, which can help increase your damage and or healing. When I started over on PCU, this is the first thing I did. I worked towards getting that 10% damage reduction, and then I pumped up to Untamed Aggression. As I started progressing, I would work my way to the spider web to get the most impactful active perks and slottables and start working on maxing those out. Then I started filling in my passives to increase my character's power, all the way up to 1500. And the blue tree is probably the most impactful for the average player. Here are some other active perks to consider and why. Damage dealers, Wrathful Strikes. This is going to grant weapon and spell damage to your damage abilities. The reason why this is great, because it affects every damage attack versus one specifically. Doesn't matter if it's damage over time, AoE, direct damage, so forth. Every attack gets a little bit stronger. Backstabber increases your critical damage done. This is useful if you're playing with a coordinated tank and or PvE group that can turn your boss away from you and you can always get to the flank or the rear. The value is higher than Fighting Finesse, but if you're front facing or playing solo, it's not worth taking because you're not going to see the advantage. Fighting Finesse is going to do the same thing, except it's going to lower the critical damage and critical healing percentage. This is useful if you're playing solo in your non-coordinated groups because you'll be facing the mobs and you're not going to be able to rely on the tank always turning them away. Backstabber, parsing, or really coordinated take it. Fighting Finesse for the average player, 100%. Next up is Master at Arms. This is going to increase your damage done with direct damage attacks. This is great because it increases almost everything that you do, almost all your important attacks. So it's a pretty much set and forget for a lot of my builds, but not always. There are plenty more like damage over time, AoE, and single target attacks. I almost always take a damage producing active perk that affects my main spamble. So in my main, my Magic Templar, I use Puncturing Sweeps as my main attack. I'll want to ramp this ability up greatly, so Biting Aura, which affects AoE damage, might be best for me. Simple thing you can do if you want to check out if the active perk increases your damage is check your tooltip, then max this out and slot it. If the tooltip on the damage went up, then it actually increases your damage of your ability. So a sample Magpar DPS CP slottable might look like this: Fighting Finesse, Master at Arms, Biting Aura, and Wrathful Strikes. Depending on if you're coordinated or not or how many damage over times, you might flex one or two out, but this is how it kind of looks on every PvE DPS. One or two flex spots, pretty simple. Moving on, tanks. What to take is, well, damage reduction slottables because you're a tank. Less damage equals good. A simple take loadout will look like this: Duelist Rebuff to reduce single target damage, Unassailable reduce AoE damage, Enduring Resolve reduce damage over time, Ironclad reduce direct damage. Healers, similar to tanks, you can take the default increase healing for specific areas like AoE, single target, and over time. But there's an additional CP that I love, and that's Rejuvenator, increasing your weapon and spell damage for healing abilities. Very similar to Wrathful Strikes, just for healers. The other ones are Focus Mending, Soothing Tithe, and Swift Renewal. And here's some miscellaneous in the blue ones. Reaving Blows. When you deal direct damage, you heal for a percentage of the damage done. This is great for brand new players who struggle with survivability and lack the Pale Ordering. Occultal Overload. When you kill an enemy under effect of a status effect, they violently explode for oblivion damage to all enemies in a 4-meter radius. This is good for PvP if you want to go out and bomb huge groups, or also if you're just grinding mobs and you want to kill them quickly. Untamed Aggression, increasing your weapon and spell damage per stage. This is useful because you can access it right away without a lot of champion points. You'll also get the benefit per point as there's no stages. Now, moving on to the Fitness or Red Constellation, consider this resource sustained movement in a PvP-ish tree. The Constellation has 3 very useful unconnected active perks you can get straight away: Boundless Vitality, Vitality, increasing your health. Ironclad, giving you armor. Fortified grants armor per stage, and Rejuvenation grants recovery across the board per stage. Tanks, you'll want to get Bracing Anchor. While in combat, increase the amount of damage you can block per stage, but reducing your movement speed. This is incredible for tanks or anyone with a back bar ice staff or a sword and shield, even in PvP. Celerity increases your movement speed depending on how much stages you have. All around a go-to PvP slottable for almost all my builds because speed kills. Pain's Refuge, reduce your damage taken by 2% for every 2 negative effects activated on you, up to a maximum of 20%. This is another meta damage reduction CP slottable for PvP, and I use it on nearly all my builds. Slippery, when you are affected by a disabling effect, meaning you get crowd controlled CC, you automatically break free for no cost. This CP is great in lag, Cyrodiil, and gives you a free break free saving stamina in clutch situations. Sustained by Suffering, increase your health, magic, and stamina recovery. This is basically a resource sustained slottable for PvP because you're constantly affected by status effects. Next up, you have two that kind of mirror each other, Siphoning Spells and Bloody Renewal. Siphoning Spells restores magic when you kill an enemy, and then Bloody Renewal restores stamina when you kill an enemy. Usually as a PvE DPS, what I do is I take the 3 ones you can access straight away. Boundless Vitality, Fortified, and Rejuvenation. Then I take one like if I'm a stand build, Bloody Renewal, or if I'm a magic build, Siphoning Spell. And for PvP builds, typically I take Boundless Vitality and Fortified, freeing up 2 slots to take depending on what I need and why. A go-to for me is usually Celerity for increased movement speed, or I take Bracing Anchor if I want to be really tanky, one of those two. And then I almost always go with Pain's Refuge to reduce my damage. I'll swap 1 or 2 out here and there, and especially take Slippery if I'm doing big lag fights, but it remains pretty much the same. All right, now we're going to switch gears and I'm going to talk about, give my opinion on when you should do content per the champion points you are. Typically people will ask me, hey, when should I do veteran dungeons, trials, hard modes, whatever? This is going to be the answer. Here are my general recommendations for PvE first. Normal dungeons. You can start these at level 10, and basically it's the easiest in the game for group content, and you shouldn't avoid them at all. Base game veteran dungeons. I would recommend starting these at CP 160 so you can collect the gear, specifically the monster helms. Sure, you can do it earlier at CP 40, but you'll have to recollect or reconstruct the gear, wasting transmutes and time. DLC veteran dungeons. So doing a random DLC veteran dungeon can be very punishing because it's random. So some can take 10 minutes to complete, others can be a slog. If you have a pre-made group and y'all are comfortable with each other, maybe going through the slog, that's one thing, but randoms, let's say you get Layer of Marslock, you have blue gear and 1 5-piece set, you're going to get kicked. So the recommendation here is if you're going to do random pug groups, at least 400 to 600 CP. Just realize it's super gear dependent in this specific situation. DLC dungeon hard modes. I would say right around 800 CP with optimal gear for your role. This shouldn't be an issue. Remember, it's more about optimal gear than raw CP, so prioritizing the right gear sets that buff your group or increase your damage is going to be most likely the best bang for your buck. Normal trials at CP 160 or higher is what I recommend doing these. We've had level 30s do normal trials in our group before, and that doesn't really make sense. To complete normal trials sub CP 160, I wouldn't do. But right around 200 to 400 CP, it just depends on your DPS. It's a math race. ESO, to be honest, has done a much better job making the trials much easier, specifically normal. And normal is way easier than veterans, so don't be afraid to try them, even if you're not God's gift to DPS. The gear sets from normal trials are only about a 2% difference compared to vet, so it's much easier to get this and have a semi-close mid-max gear set without all the sweat. Now, veteran trials. I would recommend between 800 CP and 1000 or so, depending on all the factors I previously listed. You playing with a group of friends, you're playing with randoms, you're pugging, do you have the optimal gear sets, are you actually really good at DPS, or you just play a lot and have a lot of CP? If you're doing tanking and healing, it's a little bit less of a math race, but if you're doing the veteran trials, the DPS matters so much that you just can't get away with not light attack weaving and sitting there AFK. Next up is veteran hard mode trials, 1500 plus. You need every ounce of performance with mid-max gear. Can people do it sooner? Sure, but don't be that person. Get a fully optimized build and get ready. Now let's break it down for player versus player. First up, we have Battlegrounds. Now, Battlegrounds are 0 champion points and almost entirely entirely gear and skill dependent. So you have 0 champion points, but you do have proc sets and you have mythics. So I would recommend avoiding that to start. Start low before you get to endgame, say at or around level 30 with a decent set of crafting gear. Get the hang of the combat and the pace. Once at max level, you need a strong set of gear with monster and mythics, especially the longer you play and the higher your matchmaking gets, called MMR. Battlegrounds are a great place to play PvP and get the combat down, but remember, it's entirely gear and skill dependent. Cyrodiil. Okay, this is a long one, but there are CP and non-CP campaigns. Treat the non-CP campaigns like Battlegrounds. Very gear dependent, though unlike Battlegrounds, they don't have procs enabled. Meaning, if you want to avoid the super high burst busted damage set, monster and mythics, etc., they're mostly turned off, and it's more a stat-based environment. The upside here is, well, you won't have the super sweaty mythics or proc to compete with. The downside, there's nothing to break up what we call ball groups. So unless you're in a huge clump of players, you might be in trouble. Now, for the CP-based campaigns. I started doing more serious stuff at CP 400 on PCU, and I could feel that I was at an enormous disadvantage, especially without having all the red passives that help with stamina sustain. Therefore, I'd recommend right around 800 or so, depending on your skill level, your gear, and if you're playing solo or just following the Zerg. Imperial City Sewers. I'd consider Icy almost exactly like Cyrodiil. The difference here is Icy heavily favors Nightblades who can cloak and stealth away, and Sorcerers who can streak away. I'd recommend experimenting in a no CP Icy first because the population is so small. Then at or around 800 champion points, I dip my toes into CPIC and expect to get ganked constantly. Great Deltia, I'm so fired up to earn 3,600 champion points. So how do you earn CP quickly and what are the top tricks? Well, I'm glad you asked, Johnny. Here they are. Step 1 is to increase the amount of CP you earn per hour with boosters or modifiers. Here's a quick list if you're unaware. 10% for each armor and weapon piece at purple quality or higher. 10% for ESO Plus membership. 10% for marrying another player with the Pledge of Mara. Keep in mind, you both need to have the ring equipped. 10% for being in a group, and 100% for various in-game events, though they may or may not be active. And you have the option to have a scroll or drink. You can only have one of them active at a time. 50% for Psijic Ambrosia, 100% for Ethereal Ambrosia, and a whopping 150 for the mythic Ethereal Ambrosia. Now, you stack as many modifiers as you can, and there's a couple of ways to grind out XP and CP. The quote-unquote fastest way to earn CP is by grinding mobs. I prefer instance-based grinds over Overland. Overland is like Alakir, Green Shade, all sorts of different spots, but the problem is 15 people can show up, grind, and you might encounter bots that are doing the exact same thing and selling mats. So instance-based prevents all that. You go into the instance with your friend, you can reset it, jump back in. Also, you don't want to have more than another player with you because the higher the group size, the lower XP. So it's optimal to go in here with 2 players, including yourself. There are 2 great spots currently for grinding XP. Skyreach Catacombs in Northern Craglorn and normal mode Black Rose Prison, or called BRP, in Murkmire. Skyreach's base game, you can earn Fighters Guild experience and is good XP, but it is definitely less than BRP. In Skyreach, essentially all you do is run laps around the instance-based public dungeon with a friend and or a companion. At various intervals, you stop, kill all the mobs, and move on. I have a specific grinding video for this, so more details linked in the description below if you want to see how it's done. Next up is normal Black Rose Prison, and it's mathematically the best, but it's a bit more difficult to do and does require a DLC. You'll also need a little bit higher DPS to make this go smoothly. The new strategy for completing this is up to round 2. You finish all the mobs but the last enemy, and one player dies to it. The other player grabs the resurrection sigil. It's kind of a winged looking thing, and then the other player dies. Then the person instantly activates the resurrection sigil, popping both players back up to life, respawning the adds and keeping the XP flowing. This is the densest and XP heavy stage, so bring some repair kits and watch the CP fly by. The best overall method in my opinion is doing normal random daily dungeons and battleground dailies. These both both reward massive XP per character. It can be done on any character over 50. Thus, if you have ults, you can rotate them through, getting a heap of experience points. Another trick you can do with the normal dungeon dailies is group with a level 10. I even have a second account which I do this. I group up with a level 10, which is only going to give me one of 3 normal dungeons. Spindle Clutch 1, Fungo Grotto 1, and Banner Cells 1. Skipping through all the bosses, all you have to do is kill the last boss to get the rewards. Sometimes it'll take me 2 minutes to do this, getting a massive whopping boost to XP and transmutes. It's by far the best thing to do every day for your account, even if you hate it. Group up with a lobby, Rambo through, nuke the last boss, rinse and repeat. Another way you can do this is through crafting and crafting writs on each and every character. They're going to give you a master writ voucher, which will require a separate video to explain, but doing this will net you a lot of experience and is very easy, and you can save them up. So you can just bang out a brand new tune level 1 to 50 pretty much instantly through crafting writs. Well gang, that about wraps it up, I think. I hope you got something out of the champion points video, because what looks like a really complex system just takes a little bit of time and a little bit of guidance to get used to, and then you're just off to the races, slot them and go. Just remember, if you're interested in playing Elder Scrolls Online, this is an MMO. It's not going anywhere. Sure, it has peaks and valleys just like any other game in MMO specifically, but 8+ years into this game, people are coming in each and every day, and it's actually pretty easy to get caught up. Someone like me who's sitting at over 2,000 champion points actually doesn't have much value in the system because, well, I've already peaked in my performance and there's really not much for me to do. So if there's a catch-up mechanic, it's easy to jump in and get to the end game, and there's a bunch of activities you can do without a whole lot of champion points. So do me a big favor, hit that thumbs up if you like this video, consider subscribing, and head over to Deltiasgaming.com where I have all these builds, healers, tank, PvE, PvP, everything you want to know, and of course DPS. Use that as a template, adjust for the content and what you like, and I'll do my best to continue to update these so going forward, if things change, they'll be up to date, current, grab, go, and enjoy the game. Thanks for watching.